Welcome to War Chronicle, where the echoes of history come alive. From ancient battlefields to modern war zones, we uncover the stories, strategies, and sacrifices that shaped our world. May 28, 1998, 4 o'clock in the morning, a truck rumbled over a dirt road through the desolate mountains of Pakistan. Inside it, two technicians huddled over an array of sensitive electronic equipment. Their destination was a remote site in the Chagai hills, where the Pakistani military had been conducting nuclear tests. But when they arrived, they were told to turn back. The test was not happening today. It would be delayed until further notice. But why? Just a few days earlier, the Pakistani Prime Minister had announced with great fanfare that their first ever nuclear bomb test was imminent. He declared that it would happen before May 30th, leaving only days for India, their bitter rival who had tested their own nukes just 2 weeks prior. So why did they delay it? And what happened next is the stuff of legends. Now let's go back a bit to understand how Pakistan got to this point. We all know that India and Pakistan have had a complicated relationship since their independence from British rule in 1947. In fact, they've fought 3 wars and have almost fought a 4th. They each claim the same territory, Kashmir, and have the nuclear arms race to show for it. Both sides have always claimed they need their nuclear weapons for deterrence, but no one really buys that excuse. In any case, India was the first to develop the bomb, testing their first device in 1974 and their second in 1998. When Pakistan found out about India's 1974 test, they started calling India Hindu India and asked why they could develop such weapons while Pakistan could not. Now, the answer to that question is complex, involving things like geography, raw materials, and overall size of the country. But honestly, the biggest difference between these two nations is their attitude towards international cooperation. India decided early on that if they wanted a bomb, they would build one by themselves. Pakistan felt differently. They knew they didn't have the technology or resources to build their own bomb from scratch. So they began shopping around for someone to help them. After some failed attempts, they eventually reached out to China, who agreed to share their nuclear secrets in exchange for a promise of unlimited uranium from Pakistan. This arrangement allowed Pakistan to make significant progress in the 1980s, even developing a nuclear weapon design known as the Gari. But then the Soviet Union fell, and all of Pakistan's hopes went up in smoke. See, Pakistan had made a deal with the Soviets. Once they had developed a bomb, the Pakistanis would give the Soviet scientists free rein to study it. In exchange, the Soviets would give Pakistan the technology to enrich uranium, which is vital for building a bomb. With the Soviets gone, Pakistan had no way of enriching their own uranium, and so the project was put on hold. But that didn't last long. Soon after, the United States invaded Afghanistan, and Pakistan found itself smack dab in the middle of the war on terror. You see, the U.S. needed access to Pakistani air bases to launch their drone strikes into Afghanistan. In exchange, they offered Pakistan the one thing they needed to build a bomb: enriched uranium. Within months, Pakistan had everything they needed to build their first nuclear weapons. And that brings us back to May of 1998. Pakistan had decided to conduct a series of 6 nuclear tests, codenamed Chagai 1. The first 2 would happen on May, followed by 4 more tests later in June. That meant they had only days to complete everything before the Indian ambassador to the U.S. left for Washington, D.C., to brief American officials on the matter. So what could possibly go wrong? Well, it turns out a lot. See, the people responsible for building Pakistan's bombs were not the same people tasked with testing them. One was led by Samar Mubarakmand, brilliant physicist who led the Khwarizmi Science Initiative, a group of brilliant Pakistani minds who built Pakistan's bomb in secret, though it was run by Lieutenant General Khalid Nazir, head of the Strategic Plans Division, who would oversee the logistics and security of the nuclear test. The two met on May to discuss the test, but they couldn't agree on a date. Mubarakmand insisted that the first test should be done immediately, so that the news of it would die down before India. As ambassador could leave for D.C., Nazir thought that more time was needed to ensure the safety of the test site. You see, the people living around the testing area were nomadic goat herders, and relocating them would take a lot of time and effort. But Nazir knew that relocating them was the only option if they were going to get the test off the ground without any interference. Nazir sent his subordinate, Brigadier Javed Hassan, to find a solution. Hassan talked to the local elders and convinced them to move to a nearby village, assuring them that they would be back in their homes within a week. But once the entire community had moved out, Hassan never came back. Days turned into weeks and the villagers were getting restless. Meanwhile, preparations for the nuclear test were underway. On May, thousands of troops surrounded the test site, turning it into one of the most secure places on Earth. No one was allowed in or out, and foreign journalists, hoping to witness history, were instead flown to a nearby hilltop where they could look but not touch. But something strange was happening. India's ambassador had left for the United States on May. The day Pakistan was supposed to conduct their first nuke test. Nothing happened. The assembled troops and journalists waited all day, but at 4 o'clock in the morning, they heard no explosion. Instead, they saw fireworks. Some journalists even reported seeing a plume of white smoke rising into the sky, indicating a successful test. But nobody said anything. The world was none the wiser. In reality, the test had been called off at the very last moment. You see, the Pakistani army had been planning the test for months, and there was no way they were letting a small group of goat herders stand in their way. But they also didn't want to relocate the entire community just to appease the ego of their politicians, so they decided to delay the test indefinitely. It's hard to say what exactly happened next. Pakistan claims that they conducted several underground nuclear tests during the following weeks, while India claims that no tests took place at all. What we do know is that Pakistan continued to build up their arsenal throughout the 1990s, and by the end of the decade, it successfully conducted a total of 8 nuclear tests. As for India, they too were not idle. In 1999, Indian and Pakistani troops clashed in the Kargil War, a conflict that almost escalated into a full-blown war. But both sides pulled back at the last minute. However, that didn't stop India from conducting another series of nuclear tests. Codenamed Smiling Buddha II, India conducted 3 nuclear tests, including one of the largest ever recorded, declaring that their nuclear tests were a complete success. So why did Pakistan suddenly feel the need to rush their nuclear program? Why did they put so much effort into keeping their tests a secret? And what effect did the United States have on all of this? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, big thank you to my supporters for making these videos possible.